Hey, you all. Happy New Year. It is the 1 year anniversary of Go with the Flow, and I am your host, Miss Flo. I'm so excited for this 1 year opportunity, but it's going to be many more years. I promise you that. This episode, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I was not expecting today's topic to be the first episode. I was hoping that this would be a little bit more lighthearted and that I could get into RuPaul's Drag Race, the season 15, 16 Girls wonderful premiere. And it didn't turn out that way. This first episode of a podcast that I am so excited for. I have to go into a deep dive, I have to go dark. But it's necessary, and it's a necessary conversation that we need to have as a community, as a country, as global citizens. But I'm rambling. I'd rather just go ahead and at least show you guys what I'm referring to. So, one of the first posts that I made this year was in regards to news as Benedict Cumberbatch. Sorry, excuse me. Uh, it was reported that he may be on the hook for reparations, and I sought the opportunity to comment on it as a podcaster usually would. I thought that it would be a good opportunity to spark the conversations about reparations because it seems like that topic kind of waned. I'm just going to go ahead and show you the post and the reason for this episode. This is a great way to start off the new year. We need to resume the conversation around reparation and finally leveling the playing field around generational wealth. This is me. This is just like just excited about this topic and that it's returning because it's a conversation that needs to be had. And of course, the comment sections. Well, I'm gonna let you read. First one by Away Tay Funk. Bullshit. Nothing else to add there. I guess he's just upset about the idea. Fever. I'm assuming this is either Fever Rodent said, ask reparations from the people that sold you and not the ones who bought you. I'm assuming she thought she ate, but you're starving, darling. You are very much starving. And let me elaborate. If the drug buyer is buying an illegal substance from the drug dealer, they're both going to be arrested. Both are going to be held accountable. I don't know what you think is worse. Those that are selling it, like the seller would be out of business if nobody bought in. Let me continue. Nobody's Fool 67 said, I think you should all do some more research. Blacks were selling their own people way before any white man came along. But hey, gotta keep the narrative alive. I saw Woman King, very much aware that Africans were involved in slavery. But was that the type of slavery that was used in the Atlantic slave trade? There's just no. No, it wasn't. The type of slavery that Africans implemented was a result, it was a type of punishment. It was like you committed a crime or you were in debt, then you were a slave. It was part of their class system. Do I agree with that form of punishment? Of course not. But you cannot truly compare the type of slavery Africans were implementing to what the colonizers were doing. Let's continue, shall we? Stock.8, paying for crimes that happen to people who aren't alive. Makes sense. We're not paying for the ones that aren't alive. You're trying to make things right with their descendants. Because what people fail to realize is that we are still feeling the aftershocks of slavery and Jim Crow to this day. Nice try. Nathan Reamer, 94. Bruh, your ancestors sold your ancestors to everyone. Blame your own people first. Same point as earlier. We recognize that African American, well, not African Americans, I'm sorry. Africans did sell their own people to the slave trade. And that's part of like two factors. One, Africans did not see slaves, because again, that's part of their class system, as one of their own. So they didn't care what happened to them. The other part of that is we still had colonizers that came into African countries. If they didn't buy them, they definitely did some kidnapping. Let's not forget that part. And even raided these African countries and forced this type of trade. Laugh my fucking ass off. No. Okay. Just no point in that. Holler baller, or scammers looking for a handout. Reparations isn't a scam, sir. It's a form of justice. And how are you supposed to scam? How are you supposed to scam? I don't understand. We're melanated. We're in America and still feeling the consequences of these crimes, sir. There's no scam here. Kamala Harris' family were slave owners. This is by Quicksilver 3864. I mean, okay. She's and biracial, so I'm pretty sure most African Americans are probably also descendants from owners, and that wasn't consensual. They tried. They really tried. And some of you may ask me, well, why didn't you reply into the comments? One, I first saw this like while I was at work, while I am getting ready for my classes, and I'm not gonna lie, this really bothered me. Like it like to my core. Because every time African Americans, black people in this country bring up reparations, we get comments like that. But if any other minority or any other group of people who have faced atrocities or descendants of people that face the atrocities, they do not get this pushback. They don't get this. at all. People are on board, they feel that it's right, and it is justified. So the question is not whether or not African Americans deserve some form of reparation, but we can ask who should be held accountable. And we're going to break all of this down in this episode. So let me go ahead and just first I'm gonna explain like why do we need reparations? Like why have we been pressing that for so long? I'll show you. So just FYI, this graph is by my high school journalism program's documentary, Fading Color. It is available on our website, codefnn.com. Feel free to check it out. But as you can see here, why do we need reparations? And let me break this graph down to you for those that may be listening to the podcast later. So we have a bar graph that shows the average household income between white and black people. And if you look at this chart, whether it's from 2007 or 2021, you can see how big the wealth gap is between these two races. If we were looking at the 2021, whites made $134,000, whereas blacks $49,000. Do you see the gap? Do you see like how it's staggering? It's disheartening. But y'all are probably asking like, well, what are reparations gonna do? Reparations could actually fix this. Because if we were really getting down to the nitty-gritty is why reparations need to happen, it's not just about slavery. It's about everything that happened after slavery. There have been times where we as African Americans really tried to come up in this country. We had our own towns, we had our own businesses. We were about trying to sustain a living in the so-called land of the free. But every time we tried to be on the come up, you had racist white mobs, whether it's uh, on their own with a whole clan mentality, or our very own U.S. government has wiped towns out. If you weren't around in 2021, I believe, Amber Ruffin stated on her show, and this feed was very viral, how today's lakes and parks were once former black towns, and that were either people were either burned to the ground, flooded, or just black people being ran out of their own communities. And as you can see here, here's a list. Lake Martin took up two black towns. Central Park, the most iconic park, or one of the most iconic parks in the country, but definitely in New York City, it was just like fun, the scene of like many movies and a place where uh talent perform for change. A happy-go-lucky, location, and look at its history. The consequences of just erasing these black towns. Just think of how much money and how much property Black people could have owned if these places still stand. Do you think that wealth gap would still be there? The answer is no. They would have passed down those homes, that level of wealth to their children, and the cycle would have continued where we would be at a better footing in this country. But unfortunately, this is our reality. And it didn't stop there. If we weren't forced, like, if we weren't violently displaced, the US government started to get smarter. We have redlining. If you're not familiar with the concept, it was the refusal of a loan or insurance to someone because they lived in an area deemed to be a poor financial risk. And guess what areas they considered to be poor financial risk? Primarily Black areas. And actively denying Black people the right to own homes and property pushed this back even further. When I did the documentary with my students, Fading Color, on gentrification, I knew that I had to have my students look at the history and the pattern of behavior this country has on moving minorities out so they could take over. And it's still happening to this day. It's just not as violent, it's not as bloody. They found a way to keep us out and block opportunities without getting their hands dirty. So, with reparations, it can make things right. It could allow African Americans the opportunity to catch up and start building that generational wealth. And I'm pretty sure those that are in the comments also complain about welfare and how African Americans and minorities are just milking the taxpayers or being leeches. But that could all end if we implement reparations. And it's not a new concept, it's been done. There are ways to do it, and it has worked very well. If we look at reparations that have been made so far, so if you're familiar with the Tuskegee experiments, or if you're not, that was when Black men were unknowingly injected with syphilis and were left untreated for years, just so they could see the effects of it. They were treated as human guinea pigs. But the descendants and the families that were affected by this, they were given a $10 million settlement in 1974 and received free lifetime medical care. The survivors of the Japanese internment camps during World War II, they received $20,000 each because they too were also displaced solely because Americans did not trust American Japanese people after the attack on Pearl Harbor. They were racially profiled and ironically also put in camps, same way as those that suffered from the Holocaust. But giving them reparations, that helped them balance things and help build that wealth so they can help them maybe buy new homes. Again, it's making things right. Speaking of the Holocaust, of course you know the survivors, they received reparations from Germany. 89, I think it's like around 89 billion. Anybody in the Holocaust, Jewish people, blacks, gays, anybody that wasn't a straight white male, devout Christian, Catholic, whichever way, you were in the camps. You were stripped of your jewels, all your money was taken, your houses were raided, they were transported to these camps, head shaved, tattooed, or better yet, scarred, bodies desecrated, because tattoos are against their religion. The psychological damage from that, the trauma of that, being experimented on, killed for just no reason. Yes, of course they deserve those reparations. The Rosewood Massacre, that was a black town that was burned to the ground with men, women, and children killed, and any survivor that was left was forced to leave. Florida has made arrangements for each survivor, the 9 survivors, to receive $150,000, and the descendants of those survivors receive free college education. A free college education. There's ways to make reparations happen. And again, to remind you, like, look at this. You see how great the gap is and the disadvantage that black people have in this country. So why not make the effort to make it right? So now that we have gone over why we need reparations, let's discuss who should be held accountable. Should it be the US government? Should it be parts of Africa that sold slaves? Or should it be the European countries that actually started colonizing? Or, another fourth option, should the descendants of slave owners have to pay anything? And to that, I'm going to show you it's a complicated question. So if I were to use Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, now granted again, he's not going to be held responsible. Um, the they're going to seek the government. They're going to have the government make those reparations, so that's their goal. But I do think that as influential as Cumberbatch is, I think that he could use his platform to really advocate for reparations and even provide opportunities for minorities in the Hollywood industry. There's been outcries to show not just diversity on camera, but also behind it. He could put in his contracts. He would like to see more African American writers, directors, uh, cinematographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, um, costume designers. He doesn't have to pay in cash, but he could use his voice to help bring people aboard. Sound fair to you? Now, in terms of like who should pay the big bucks, I'm still leaning more towards the US and even perhaps the European countries that started it all. Because, well, let me start with the US first. It wasn't just slavery itself, it was, again, as we talked about earlier, it was the things that followed, where they purposely did everything in their power to stop us from achieving wealth. Anytime we try to do things on our own, it was wiped away. And then we don't hear about it in our history books because they want us to forget. America needs to do the right thing and start working towards creating some form of reparation, whether it's through loan forgiveness, whether college loans or mortgages. They can do cash payouts, whether through another stimulus package. America has the money. They're willing to provide billions in aid to the Ukraine. So they have the money. They're capable of doing it. So why can't they lend out money and provide it into black communities that provide more after school programs so our young people can stay out of trouble? Why can't they provide adequate free mental health services for the black community? Because the amount of trauma that we have faced and reliving is paying its toll. These are just some of the things that I want y'all to start thinking about. And I think that those that do hear it and may feel a little bit uncomfortable or upset about the idea of reparations, I want them to hear us and understand where we're coming from. I want you to understand how this is still affecting us today and that it could be made right. But I need you to listen first and let's come together, let's have a conversation to fix it. And don't just immediately dismiss it. Don't just say, well, like, oh, your people sold you out too. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm gonna cut my podcast a little bit short because I feel like I have made my points. And I appreciate for all those who are watching and eventually you will be listening. Make sure that you follow me on all my social platforms, Noir Vibes DC. And again, you can't go wrong when you go with the flow. I'll catch you guys next time.